one of my earliest memories of this whole experience was in December of 2019. We took advantage of the fact that you were in LA to get some blood work done. And Darren said, look, here's the deal. You and Chris are going to sit down in January in Australia to kick off the first bit of shooting. And I want you to walk Chris through his blood work just as you would do with a patient the very first time. And I said, okay, great. So I get the blood test back about 2 weeks before I'm supposed to go out to Australia. And I see something in it that I say, Darren, I can't walk him through this for the first time on camera. That's not fair to him. And I know you guys would like, I know that that's what sort of the drama is, but this is a bit too much. But I can't tell you, Darren, what it is. So without telling you, you need to trust me that this can't be done on camera for the first time. This one thing, you can do the whole lab, but this one thing. So I asked him to sort of trust me, and he did, and then we connected. So
he called me first.
Yeah,
kind of in a panic and was like, "You've got to call Peter Attia. Something's come up, but I don't know what it is." And I was like, "Oh God, this is how long have I got left? What's happening?" and so I was kind of rattled before we even got on the phone.
We did sort of the $1 million workup on you. We've got every blood test one can get, and I've looked at every gene in your body 6 ways to Sunday. And overall, your labs look fantastic. And I think looking at you from the outside, it's clear how much you take care of yourself. But we did find a couple of things that are a cause for concern.
Right.
Some of the genetic testing that we did looked at a gene for a protein called ApoE. You have a very rare combination, which is you have 2 copies of ApoE4, a set from your mom and a set from your dad.
And what does that mean exactly?
That means you have an increased risk of Alzheimer's disease.
How much higher?
Probably somewhere between 8 and 10 times higher than that of someone in the general population.
Yeah, right, okay.
You're, I don't know, you're constantly thinking you're going to live forever, especially as a young individual, and then to all of a sudden be told, oh, this may be the thing that might take you out, was like, whoa, kind of floored me for a minute.
It's hard to imagine, but it's my belief that if we take every step possible, we can reduce your risk to that of anyone else.
Sure.
In fact, I don't think you'll believe me when I say this, but I think you will in time. You having this gene is probably a blessing.
Because the motivation that'll get me to...
Yeah, this is going to motivate you to take steps today that most people your age would never think about until they're in their 50s or 60s.
Sure.
I hadn't had too many patients that had this combination of ApoE4/4. It's not a very common genotype. It's only about 1% of the population. So I probably only at that time had maybe 3 patients that had it. And truthfully, 2 of the 3 of them kind of suspected it before the blood test based on their family history.
Yeah.
In one case, about a 40-year-old woman, total shocker. And so I remember just sort of trying to say, look, this is a gene that really increases risk of Alzheimer's disease, but it's not a deterministic gene. Something someone like me can take for granted because I'm sort of in this space. I think that's a hard concept to explain to somebody who doesn't eat, sleep, and breathe genetics, which is you have this gene and it doesn't guarantee this thing is going to happen. And there are some genes that do, by the way. This isn't that kind of gene, but it's increasing your odds. That's the bad news. And then the good news is the earlier you know this, the more you can do to mitigate risk. So that was my message. But what did you hear? I mean, how much do you think back to that?
Yeah, again, I knew nothing about the science or the sort of the markers and so on outside of that one conversation. And so I hung up and I was trying to explain it to my wife, and I was like, yeah, I'm not really sure what he just said, but I think I'm more vulnerable to Alzheimer's. And then we had another conversation, and I wish we'd had more conversations immediately after, because I did spend sort of a week going, what does this mean? What's going to happen? And how long have I got? And I'm trying to talk to my parents about it, and they didn't know much about it either. My grandfather has Alzheimer's, and it's been very tragic to watch. And So they were aware of it, but didn't know in any great detail about the gene combination that we were talking about. But as you say, it was just a good sort of kick in the arse and a reminder to, do what I can, whatever's within my control and within my power to give myself the best fighting chance. And, whatever work I'm doing for brain health benefits the rest of my body and the rest of my life anyway. So, we turned it into a positive.
One of the things that was sort of interesting about filming this is we obviously came out, we filmed it, and we did everything in duplicate for those episodes. Right? We did everything. We talked about all this stuff. We went through all this stuff. And then, of course, it was also done, which is, hey, there's a really good chance that we're not going to want to talk about this particular aspect of Chris's health publicly. So let's redo that whole thing, but without that.
Yeah.
And I think for about 2 years, we didn't know which version of this was going to happen. Obviously, the decision was 100% yours. When and why did you decide that you wanted to be public with something so personal?
Once I understood more about it, but also, the same reason it's motivated me to make positive changes, I thought, well, that's a great opportunity for anyone else out there who may be in the same situation, to either go and get checked or to understand more about brain health and see what they have within their power to make that change. So I thought, it's a missed opportunity to motivate others to do the same if I don't talk about it. And then they cut together two versions of the episode, and the other one was just kind of fell flat and didn't, So there was no, it didn't over dramatize it or exploit or anything. I think what they did a great job at was it just became relatable. It became, and this is what most of the series was like, look, he's a human being like you or I, and the sort of superhero costume aside, this is an individual who has many of the same challenges and is up against the same things that all of us are. So,
even though you have 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene, which is a very rare combination, 20 to 25% of the population has at least 1 copy of the E4 gene. And even though that doesn't increase their risk as much as the increase that you experience, it still does. Even though it's only 20 to 25% of the population that has that gene, that group of people makes up about 2/3 of cases of Alzheimer's disease. So I do think I applaud you for doing it, and I'm really glad you did decide to do this, because I've always said I really wish every single person would know their ApoE genotype early in life.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of resistance in the medical community to this, truthfully. There are a lot of physicians who would say, look, no one should know that. There's nothing that can be done about it. Why would you burden somebody with that knowledge?
Yeah.
And people like me and Richard Isaacson, Kellyanne Neotis, people I work with, we fundamentally disagree with that, Chris. We think that is complete nonsense. And we think that this is absolutely a condition through which you have an enormous lever arm to mitigate risk. And if that's true, which I wholeheartedly believe it is, then not knowing that information early is criminal.
Yeah. Well, and also, as we're saying, that whatever I do in regards to, protection and arming myself with, the sort of tools to have the best chance, it benefits everything else anyway. We talked about,
exactly.
Reducing stress levels, more mindfulness practices, there's certain training I do, nutrition, my sleep habits. All those things made a dramatic difference in every other part of my life too. So